Rad Family! We know fairy tales to be whimsical stories with a moral root, usually romanticized tellings of good overcoming evil. But the tales we grew up listening to are not the original versions. In fact, once you see where Disney gets so much of their inspiration from, you'll find that they may have left the lesson of the story the same, but they changed quite a few details along the journey. You may want to prepare yourself because not everyone gets a happy ending. So let's get to it. Number 3, Little Red Riding Hood. We know Little Red Riding Hood as the sweet, innocent little girl that travels through the woods to deliver yummy goodies to her sickly grandmother. The story takes a dramatic twist when she arrives at her grandmother's to find a wolf disguised in her clothing lying in her bed. After a climatic conversation where Little Red kind of rudely points out the wolf's inhuman features, the fairy tale usually ends with a big burly man busting through the door in the nick of time to save Little Red and her grandmother from being digested by the furry imposter. Good triumphs evil, everyone besides the evil wolf has a happy ending, and the point of the story is to spread the common belief that only bad things happen in the forest, so it should be avoided at all costs. Overall, a cute story, right? But that's the clean version. In the earlier gory variations, things aren't so child-friendly. The first major difference is that Nana is dead from the get-go, apparently having quite the table manners. The wolf leaves a few cut-up pieces of grandmother on a plate, and upon seeing the delicious meal laid out on a table, Little Red unknowingly engages in cannibalism. Yes, she eats her grandma. Through hints, Little Red sees through the facade and is aware of the wolf's presence. Knowing very well that she cannot fight this evil creature by herself because of her small size, she plans an escape. She complains of severe stomach issues and asks to go to the bathroom, not wanting his next meal to be covered in poop because apparently that would just taste awful. He ties a string around her so that she can't escape, but Red is quite the cunning child and slips off the string and makes a break for it. The wolf proceeds to chase her but meets his demise when he drowns in a river. It's pretty understandable why a few details of the supposed child story has been changed throughout the years, isn't it? Number 2, Cinderella. We've grown up thinking that Cinderella is this beautiful story about a once abused woman's dreams coming true. She meets her fairy godmother that transforms her into an elegant princess and then shuffles her off to the kingdom's biggest ball where she dances the night away with Prince Charming. At the stroke of midnight, she flees in fear that he'll see her in her natural, less glamorous state. In the process, she leaves behind a glass slipper. He then goes on a manhunt to find his one true love, and when he finally finds her, he accepts her for who she is, they get married and live a happily ever after life together in luxury. All in all, it's quite the feel-good story. It does its intended purpose of expressing unjust oppression. But for it to be on this list, we know this isn't how things initially went down. To start off with, the name Cinderella is derived from the word cinder or ash, which is a reference to servants often of times being covered in soot-soiled clothing. Living in filthy, damp basements, it wasn't uncommon to cuddle up to a fireplace. And seeing as bathing was for the privileged and not the help, it explains why the clothing would be dirty. The story follows a pretty similar path, opening with the abuse by the hands of the wicked stepmother and stepsisters. But two big differences among the variations is that the ball takes place over 3 nights and there is no godmother. Instead, her dreams come true with the help of a wishing tree that grows from her mother's grave and is watered by her nightly tears of loneliness. After a white bird delivers a beautiful ball gown and gold slippers, she goes to the ball even though her evil stepmother forbade her from attending. Each night she shows up to the ball in a dress grander than the previous, and she dances the hours away with the prince. While the first 2 nights she made her departure without a hitch. On the 3rd night, the prince was bound and determined to not let his pretty princess escape. So he did what any sane man would do. He covered the stairway with sticky pitch in hopes of trapping her. You know, totally normal stuff. His plan of course fails, and all that is left in the thick goop is her slipper. So he declares to the kingdom that he'll marry anyone whose foot can fit into the shoe. At the advice of the stepmother, one stepdaughter eagerly chops off her toes in order to fit into the shoe. Ew. But her plan is ruined when two white birds inform the prince of her lie. You'd think he would have noticed the trail of blood, but I mean, maybe he's just not observant. Appalled, he marches back to the home and demands the other stepsister try on the shoe. Of course, the stepmother also advised her to chop off part of her heel in order to fit into the shoe. What is wrong with this woman? She is an awful mother. Not being the sharpest tool in the shed, he is once again fooled. The doves again find the prince and inform him of the lie, and for whatever reason, he returns back to the house in hopes of finding another woman to fit into the shoe, and that is where he finds Cinderella, and he recognizes her as the love of his life. And they actually go off to live happily ever after. But the two stepsisters don't. At the wedding, those two white birds swoop down and gouge their eyes out, leaving them blind and mutilated. Talk about karma. Number 1, Snow White. We've all heard the tale of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The tale of a pretty pale maiden that is living in hiding from her jealous stepmother at the home of 7 very unique personalities. The story focuses more on the bonding between Snow White and the 7 dwarfs and less of the threat of death by the hands of the evil queen. The moral of the story is along the lines that greed and envy will ruin a person. While Disney and Brothers Grimm versions share similar events and follow the same general path, the Brothers Grimm version is obviously much darker, and if you ask me, more interesting. Snow White's mother dies while giving birth to her, and her father remarries a horribly vain and truly evil woman. The new queen spends most of her days staring into a magical mirror, asking if she is the prettiest woman alive. And she was, up until Snow White turned 7. When asked on that day, the mirror lays down the sickest burn in the history of burns by saying, "My queen, you are the fairest, here so true, but Snow White is 1,000 times more beautiful than you." Ouch! Turning green with envy, the queen hires a huntsman to take Snow White into the deepest part of the forest and violently murder her. For proof that he did so, she demands he brings her liver and her lungs. When push came to shove, he couldn't go through with it, and Snow White runs off into the woods. He then brings the lungs and liver of a wild animal, which the queen proceeds to eat in hopes that it will allow her to absorb Snow White's beauty. Snow White then stumbles across the home of the 7 dwarfs, and they allow her to stay with them as long as she becomes their house servant. Of course, the situation doesn't last very long because the magic mirror reveals her whereabouts, and the queen travels to the 7 dwarfs' home with a plan. She disguises herself as a peddler and persuades Snow into trying on the tightest corset ever created. Snow White faints, and the queen leaves her there to suffocate. Only it ends up not working, and the queen devises a third plan to kill Snow White, and that involves a poisoned apple. She eats the apple and falls into a coma. The dwarfs then think she's dead and put her in a glass coffin. Sometime later, her beauty still preserved in a glass tomb. A passing prince sees her beauty and demands to have her. As her coffin is carried away, those carrying it trip, and the disturbance causes the poison to dislodge from her throat. She then awakens and falls in love with the prince because, you know, nothing screams romance like a man that wanted your unconscious body hung like a trophy in his man cave. The two then invite the wicked queen to their wedding. Unsure if it truly is Snow White, the queen agrees to go, and upon arrival, White exacts her wonderfully fitting revenge. The queen is forced into a pair of iron-hot shoes and is made to dance until she falls to her death. I wish I could make a Panic at the Disco or Death on the Dance Floor pun, but I got nothing. And there you have it! 3 of the most popular and iconic Disney princesses told in the original versions. This list was certainly a lot of fun to do research for, and it totally didn't make me rethink some of my childhood memories. If you liked it and wish to see more like it, give it a big thumbs up! Share this video with a few people that grew up watching Disney movies, and let them be in disbelief too. And if you're not part of this fantastic community, well, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and join today! Until next time, bye!